Welcome to another episode of the GayBarchives show, where we explore gay history, one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and today our guest is Gregory Franklyn, who will be telling us about his first experience in a Phoenix bar, as well as several bars in Portland, Oregon, and his video project on the City Nightclub in Portland. So welcome to the show, Gregory.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I've been doing this project kind of digging up memories of gay bars all over the country. And it's always exciting to me when I find somebody who has not only a long history in the gay bar scene, but also has some very relevant memories to talk about. And you're about to take us somewhere that we have not yet been in this series. I've done about 47 of these segments, and no one has ever talked about a bar in Phoenix. So why don't you tell us, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about your first bar experience?
The first gay bar that I ever went to in life was in Phoenix, Arizona. It was called Hisco Disco. It was a pretty small hole-in-the-wall kind of disco place, a lot of music. Anyway, I was around 28, and I was in the process of coming out to myself. Evidently, I learned later that everybody in my life knew that I was gay before I did. So I was a Catholic boy, and I was trying to do good. So anyway, so when I finally got to that point, I went into Hisco Disco, and this was a pivotal experience for me because I never felt conflicting emotions like I did that night. I mean, first of all, I was horrified that here's a place where men are kissing men and hugging and being loving to one another. And I'm just going, oh my God, you know? And then another part of me was going, this feels like home. That's what this feels like, you know? So, I mean, the whole night I was just sitting there, and I had a couple of drinks, tried to hide in the corner and just observe and have these just like huge emotions going in different directions. So it was, I went back several times until I got comfortable with it and did some dating and all that kind of stuff. But those are kind of distant memories. But the thing I do remember about being in that bar was that it was so pivotal. I will never forget the feeling that I had that night. That was amazing.
You know, it's
good and bad.
It's not surprising at all. Many of the guests I've spoken to, they tell me the same kind of thing, that the first gay bar that they went to kind of made them feel like more comfortable with themselves, and that it was a community that they could feel a part of. They didn't feel like an outlier anymore, like this weirdo that didn't belong anywhere in society. And especially if it was a large bar, they felt even more included, because it was like, not only is this a bar for gay people, but it's a nice place. It's not a little dumpy hole in the wall with 6 bar stools. Now, it
was a little bigger than that, but yeah, I get it.
Well, I'm assuming Hisco Disco was a decent sized bar and probably had a dance floor. Otherwise, it would be kind of weird to call it a disco.
Yeah, it was a medium sized, small by my standards.
Well, especially now, once you get to explore other bars, there's so many huge bars out there.
Yeah.
Where in Phoenix was this?
This was, it was in Phoenix proper. It was on 7th Avenue. I think it was like Thomas or McDowell, maybe.
And was it a very disco oriented when you went in there? Did you?
Yeah, it was a disco in every sense of the word. It was one of the few gay establishments that I've ever been to that didn't have 2 bars and a restaurant. You know,
a lot of them had bars.
Just a disco.
A lot of them had restaurants back in the day, because that was a good cover for them, and they got, you know, a little extra revenue, and it made it easier to push through with the city. But that must have been quite an experience to walk in there. And now, had you been to other discos or other big clubs before?
I had been to straight bars, but mostly this was like in the late 70s when live music was happening. I went to a lot of bars where there was live music, and that was the main thing, but those were straight bars. And I was kind of comfortable there because I was still trying to be straight at the time. So little did I know.
The Hisco Disco. We'll definitely have to look that up. I have not heard about it before, but I will delve into my archives and see what I can dig up about it, because it sounds like it was kind of an interesting place that had an impact on your life,
Yeah.
at least. So after Hisco Disco, had you pretty much figured out that, yeah, I belong in the gay community, and that's what you did for the rest of your adult career?
Pretty much, yeah. I lived in Eureka, California for a long time, and there was a gay bar there called the Driftwood. I didn't really go there much, but I was involved with a group there called Humboldt United Gays. This is in Eureka, California. And I was really active there. I was edited the newsletter a couple of times, and I had a social group, that was kind of surrounded about Humboldt United Gays. And gay organizations or gay groupings in small towns like Eureka is it's very weird. They'll be really small, and everybody will know everybody.
And then you were in Eureka for a while after Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then I guess at some point you moved to Portland?
I moved to Seattle first for about a year. And there I hung out at a bar called Neighbors. And then there was another bar that was like across the alley from them called the Brass Door. And I hung out at those two places. And at the time, I was young and pretty. And my objective was to go in there and pick a time of night, which is usually around 11:30 or 12, and walk up to who I thought was the finest man in the room and ask him to dance. And that's how I met friends in Seattle. I was only there for a year. During the whole year that I was there, never took home any dick. None the whole year.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Well, that's a good enough reason in itself to move to Portland.
Yeah. Portland, when I moved to Portland, this is like 35 years ago. It was like I didn't have culture shock. I mean, literally, I was here for about 20 minutes and I felt like I was at home. Portland's heart beats at the same speed as mine does. That's what I've figured out.
And I've heard some good stories about some of the bars in Portland. One of the ones that you mentioned was a bar called Embers,
yeah,
which, according to my research, was also known as Embers Avenue.
Yes.
And it had quite a long history in Portland. I think it opened in the late 60s and didn't close till about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's correct.
So it was there for quite a while, quite an iconic bar.
It was during that time, Art, it was definitely the main hub of gay life in Portland.
What kind of bar was that?
Well, it was a drag queen bar in the front, and then there was a full-on disco in the back. And it did have an upstairs, which was used sometimes for special events, but they were kind of nervous about putting people up there because they were afraid the floor would give way. It never did, thank God. But yeah, it was pretty much the hub of gay social life in Portland for what, 30 years, something like that.
Yeah, it was actually open for 48 years.
Yeah, okay.
So it was there for a long time, and it was kind of funny. I read a review from Frommer's. The reviewer rated the nightclub, and his description of the club was primarily a gay disco, also appealing to straight people, with lots of flashing lights and sweaty bodies until the early morning.
That's actually true, because the disco part included a lot of straight people. I mean, it wasn't exclusively straight, because I have been in there several times and I felt comfortable. So most of the straight people that came to the Embers Avenue, the Embers is actually the front bar, which is where drag queens happen. And I was a performer there for a while. I wasn't in drag or anything. We would sing live in between the drag queens. There were a few of us. Anyway, the back bar is a straight on disco, and the people who would come to that, it's called Embers Avenue, by the way. That's why there's two names. One is Embers and the other is Embers Avenue.
Okay.
So the people who would be coming to Embers Avenue knew that it was a gay bar. So there was a time in the early mid 80s where there was this big thing about straight people slumming at gay bars. And I wasn't having a particularly good time then because it kind of diluted the energy about why I was there. So,
and that was common in a lot of the disco type bars anyway.
oh yeah.
When you kind of look back on your history at gay bars, you notice that before the disco era kicked in, a lot of the bars were smaller neighborhood bars. They were typically very segmented, especially in larger cities that had population of different races. You would find them being largely white male or largely Hispanic male or largely female, but you wouldn't find the mixture so much. And then when the disco era came around, you started to see people of different cultures and different genders showing up at the same bar because the music was what was drawing them, and they all had this connection to disco music some way or another. So I think the disco scene kind of changed the face of the bigger gay bars anyway.
Oh yeah.
Now, you had also mentioned there was another bar in Portland that played a role in your gay history, which was called Briggs or the Brig.
Brig Boxes. Yeah, this was another bar. It had two bars and a restaurant that were kind of this complex, I guess you'd call it. And that's where I did a lot of dancing, and that's where I got dick, basically.
Now, from my research on other bars that use the name Brig, they were usually kind of somewhat macho, leather, maybe Western or Levi.
It was trying to be.
Is that kind of what the Brig was too?
No, it was trying to be. It probably wanted to be, and that's probably has something to do with why it eventually changed its name. The setup was that you have the main room, which has a dance floor surrounded by hospital bars, or jail bars. And it was like a pit. You kind of step down into the dance floor and you're in this cage like thing. And that was kind of fun. But the clientele wasn't necessarily your biker leather kind of, it was everybody.
And how long was that one around?
That was around for, gosh, probably about 10 years. And then it evolved into Panorama and Boxes. So they opened up another section of that building and made a bigger disco, which was kind of fun. And it was the happening place for quite a while. For about that 10 years, Boxes, Brig, Panorama was the disco.
You've had an experience with a number of different bars in different cities. It sounds like to me, Hisco Disco was probably the biggest disco bar of the group that we've talked about so far.
Size-wise, no, absolutely not. It was probably the smallest.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The other bar that was big here at the time was called Flossie's. And when Flossie passed away, it changed to Silverado, and it's still open now. It's now downtown. It was on Stark Street. So what you probably don't know is that Stark Street was our Vaseline alley. That's where all the gay bars were. Okay. And then the city came in and said, well, no, we don't want this. It was kind of a triangle streetwise. And the city came in and said, no, we don't want gay people concentrated in one area. So they kind of chased the gay bars out. And then after all the gay bars had been chased out, well, there's still one there left, but after all the gays had been chased out, then they changed the name of the street to Harvey Milk Boulevard. Go figure. I don't know. Anyway, now the gay bars that are left are kind of spread out around the city. The bars that were happening while I was in my bar going days, it has been quite a while since I've been in a gay bar. But the bars that were big when I was here was Ray's Ordinary. There was the Matador. There was the Shanghai. gosh, a whole mess of them.
And that was when in like the 80s?
Yeah, that would have been the 80s, early 90s. And the City Nightclub, of course. The City Nightclub, one of the things I dug about the City Nightclub, and I was there for 10 years, and my thing was as the video guy. The club was set up with a television studio integrated into the club. So we had a control room, a video control room, which was hooked up to the DJ booth, and we had cameras around and all that kind of stuff. And that's what Night Scene was. Also, we did a show there called Outrageous. Now, during the time that I was there, the city tried to close down Lanny's Club, the City Nightclub, tried to close it down altogether. They just didn't like him, you know. And the reason why he was not very popular to them is because, you know, first of all, he's an atheist. He doesn't object to young people under the age of 18 having sex with people over the age of 18. He has a television show trying to help legalize marijuana, and another television show which is about atheism controlling religion. So City Hall was horrified by this guy. You know, he has everything that they didn't want around kids, you know.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about Lanny, and I'm sure obviously you worked with him and you knew him pretty well.
Yeah. He's a good friend.
And he moved, where did he move? To California or Denver?
Yeah, in and around Palm Springs.
Palm Springs. I knew it was somewhere that marijuana was legalized, and I knew that he was still very active in the
he's still very active
in the marijuana scene.
Yeah.
But the story about City was kind of interesting, and you did a video about you know, the City Nightclub and talking to some of the people who were there, and talk, you know, Lanny appears in the video several times, and in the course of that video, I think you tell a story a little bit about how it actually came to be. And why don't you talk about that a little bit? How the City Nightclub became what it was ultimately.
Well, the story about the City Nightclub and its previous incarnations and post incarnations is basically Lanny. Okay, now Lanny realized that there were a bunch of kids downtown in this place called Camp, which was at 3rd and Yamhill, and you know, gay kids would gather there because, you know, where are they going to go? So the police were arresting kids left and right for illegal gatherings and all that kind of crap, just giving them criminal records for nothing. So he's decided that he was going to open a club, and he did, and I think it was called Mildred's Palace, the first one. And then that one moved to another location, and I think that's when he changed it to the City Nightclub. And then after they tried to shut down the City Nightclub and we had to move it to a different location, then it became Evolution, and then The Rage, and then Escape. So that's where the kids were hanging out. Now, all of those incarnations of all ages gay and lesbian bars are gone now. The one that I was involved with most was at 13 Northwest 13th. And then when it moved, I was still involved while it moved to 333 Northwest Park. Southwest Park, I'm sorry.
And City Nightclub is a place that did not serve alcohol, correct?
It did not serve alcohol, no.
So,
now, Mildred's Palace did, but they had the bar separated into two sections, one for adult and one for kids. And so on the adult side, you could drink. On the kid side, you couldn't.
Now,
so it was always all ages.
City Nightclub, where I would assume, and I may be mistaken, but I would assume that their crowd was mostly like teens up to maybe the early to mid 20s. There weren't a lot of adults, so to speak. There were a lot of 30, 40-year-old people hanging around, were there?
At the City Nightclub, where there was no alcohol, there were not very many people that were over, say, 25. There were some old lecherous old men that would go there and, you know, try to scoop up on kids, chicken hawks. One of the things that I found really valuable about my involvement is that I had a job to do there. So the kids didn't think of me as somebody who was trying to get in their pants, which really opened up a lot of communication between me and the kids that were there. And I came away from that whole experience with major faith in what was going to happen next in the world. You know, these kids that were coming to this bar, they're roughly in ages 15 to 25, mainly. These kids were so far ahead of where I was at their age, it's not even funny. So, I mean, we're in a bad space in the United States right now, but I think things are going to get better because those kids are now 40s and they're starting to take over. I think we're going to be fine.
I certainly hope so. What year, what kind of time frame was it when you actually made that movie?
That was 1996.
Okay, so we're talking about 15 years ago. No, we're talking about 25 years ago.
25 years ago.
Yeah, we're talking about 25 years ago. I want to show a little clip of that movie right here so people know what we're talking about and they can kind of see what you were doing at that club as part of the this video project.
We're tired of being looked at and ridiculed, and we know that if we come here, we're surrounded by family, we're surrounded by friends.
Lanny Swerdlow is the owner of the City Nightclub. He started his first all-ages club in 1977. That club eventually became the City Nightclub in 1983. He saw a need for a place for youth to congregate other than on the street.
Back in 1977, there was a major problem in downtown Portland. Every Friday and Saturday night, 100 or more young people would congregate at the corner of 3rd and Yamhill. This area was affectionately called Camp, and the young people were congregating there because they were gay and lesbian, had no place else to go. The response to the city to this problem was to turn the police loose on them and bust the kids for loitering or curfew or some other trumped-up charge. Consequently, innocent young people wound up with criminal records. No one seemed to care about them. No one wanted to do anything about it. The straight community certainly didn't, and unfortunately, the gay and lesbian community didn't want us to help them either. So I realized at that time, if anything was going to be done, I guess it was up to me. I realized that they needed a place to go. And so I opened up my first club in the Pythian building, we called it Mildred's Palace, to give them a place to go. And the club was an overnight success. Hundreds of young people came out to it on the very first weekend. And the problems at the corner of 3rd and Yamhill disappeared overnight. Today, of course, they don't even hang out there.
A small percentage of the young people who frequent the City Nightclub live on the streets, having left home for a variety of reasons, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Some of them have turned to prostitution to support themselves. They come to the club to get away from the scene rather than to bring it with them. The City Nightclub is one of the few places where they can feel welcome and safe. In fact, every young person we talked to said they feel safe at the club.
I feel safe. Plus we have our little, people that help us outside to see if anybody's bringing anything violent in. Like, he'll check it in, that's good. Nothing happens.
I feel very safe at the club. Whenever there's a problem, it's always handled right away, so.
A lot safer than, walking past, 9th Street or anywhere else.
Because it's too darn hot.
There are stage shows every Saturday evening. The shows feature female impersonators and other entertainers, mostly lip-syncing to popular songs and acting out the lyrics. Many of these performers are customers of the club and very serious about this form of expression, sometimes rehearsing for weeks prior to the performance. The club allows them special times for rehearsals.
What would you ask if you had just...
Some of the performances are controversial in nature. A majority, however, are female impersonators whose performances generally leave the audience howling with laughter and yelling for more.
The shows at the City Nightclub are very important. The people who come to the club relate to them very strongly. Most of the time, the shows are just female impersonators, quite often from some of the other clubs. But quite often, the young people themselves stage the shows. And these are the shows that are really the most controversial, because a lot of these young gay people are feeling a lot of anger and hurt and bitterness towards society, and they express this rage out on the stage. It is far better that they do this on the stage than they take it out in the streets or out on themselves personally. A lot of the members of the audience connect with what is going on in the stage, and consequently, some of the emotional pressures and problems that they have to deal with are dealt with here at the club, and so when they go back out into society, they are better able to deal with them, or at least they've released some of the pressure that they have been just sort of storing up inside of them all this time.
Several cable access television shows are produced at a video production studio set up inside the club. One of them, Night Scene, is a queer American bandstand program featuring young people dancing and enjoying the music, interviews with customers about current events, and informative interviews with people and organizations prominent in the gay and lesbian community. Having produced nearly 300 shows, Night Scene is the longest-running TV show for and about gay and lesbian people in the history of television. Outrageous is the newest program produced at the club. It features live performances from the Saturday night shows. From running cameras and lights to helping out in the control room, young people who frequent the City Nightclub are involved in every production done at the facility. Between the stage shows and video productions, from 40 to 50 young people are creatively involved every month.
So what a lot of people might not realize is that this video that you did, that was extremely unusual, even in that time frame, for any sort of a gay club to embrace the idea of having video being filmed inside their bars. It was kind of unusual to, when we go back and try to find history on any of the bars from the 70s, 80s, 90s, you rarely find video because a lot of clubs didn't want the video there. The people were in the closet, they were afraid of it. Obviously, Lenny embraced that idea. He wanted to, make the whole project as public as possible. And some of these people that you interview, it's really nice to see, the real live people in the environment. They're not sitting in a movie studio 40 miles away in their, Sunday church clothes. They're in their club wear, they're in the club, you're talking to them, they're giving you honest answers about their experiences. When you were doing that, did that bring you back to your first experiences in the gay bars and saying, hey, when I was this kid's age, I wish I had this kind of experience, or I could have, had this kind of a connection with the community?
Although I feel really blessed to have been part of that experience for them while the City Nightclub was open, when I was their age, I was still trying to be straight. And I was dedicated to really trying to do this. This is what I thought I was supposed to do. And it wasn't until I was 28 years old that I finally said, okay, I can't keep this up because it's just a fucking lie, So I didn't have those experiences about yearning for being around other gay people because I thought I wasn't gay, or I was the last to know.
The City Nightclub, it was kind of an anomaly. There weren't many clubs like that anywhere.
Not very many in the whole United States. There was an author by the name of Linnea Dew, and she did a study about gathering places for gay and lesbian, or young people, and she said it was the only one like it in the country. There were other organizations, but there was no nightclub where young gay and lesbian people gathered.
Yeah, I just started.
I think there's a little tiny clip of that in that documentary, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I just started reading her book, actually, Joining the Tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just arrived a couple days ago, and I've just started reading it. But so you were at the City Nightclub for how long? 10 years? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 10 years. What I learned after the fact is that I was involved with the show Night Scene, which was the television production aspect of it. I was involved with that from its very first season. And when we shut down production in 2001, I believe, at that time it was the longest running, regularly scheduled TV series for, by, and about gay people in the history of television.
Wow. And is that available online? Can people see that if they go to your YouTube channel or anything? Or
a few of them are on my YouTube channel. One of the problems that we're having is that a lot of these shows included copyrighted material.
Right.
So I tried to post some on Facebook and got shut down. I said, you can't do that because it's copyright infringement. But I do have an archive, and between Night Scene and Outrageous programs, Outrageous, by the way, at the City Nightclub on Saturday nights, they would have a stage show where kids from the club, usually, or local drag queens would come in and put on a show for a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Okay. And we used to use a clip from that show in Night Scene. And then later we found that, there's just too much talent going on here. So we made a separate program of just those Saturday night shows, and that was called Outrage Us. And so there were two TV series originating in the bars, originating from the club.
That's pretty impressive for a bar in Portland. I mean, it's not like it was in LA or Chicago or New York where
you'd expect it to be somewhere like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's pretty adventurous of him. And, I'd really like to actually talk to the owner, to Lanny, at some point about those experiences and what inspired him to do all this, because, anybody could say, oh yeah, I feel sorry for the gay kids. Let me open a little place for them to go. But he didn't stop there. He went to every length that he could think of to make their lives more interesting and enjoyable and to give them a safe place to be. And, it was a full package. It wasn't just, oh, I bought this building and here you can go in there and dance. I mean, that would have been the easy thing to do. But he was committed.
He had a mission. He wanted there to be a safe space for gay and lesbian kids who were formerly on the streets.
Now, once City Nightclub.
Oh, by the way, you should. I think if you go to my YouTube page, I think I gave you the. YouTube.com, Gregory Franklyn. There is like an hour and a half interview with Lanny there that I did with him. This was probably 2000, maybe 2001. This was as the Night Scene was wrapping up. I did this interview with him, and it should be on there. I'm pretty sure it is.
I will definitely put a link to that in the credits and in my listings for this segment. So after City Nightclub closed, that was in the early 2000s when it closed, or?
No, I think Escape, which was owned by somebody else at that time, was still happening at that time, but Lanny was out of the picture. It was had nothing to do with him at that point. And that was around 2001, yeah.
Is there still a safe place like that?
Not now, no. The Escape has closed, so there isn't.
So the youth are out on their own again. They're looking for a new street corner to hang out on.
Well, I'm thinking, this is a very different climate in Portland than there was at the time. We are not so entirely circle the wagons mentality. Gay kids are welcome in a lot of places now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as crucially necessary as it was at the time. At the time, in Oregon, we were fighting Measure 9, and I don't know if you know anything about that, but the Oregon Citizens Alliance, which was a religious thug group, were basically trying to amend the Constitution of Oregon to say, to lump gay and lesbian people in with rapists and child molesters and all this kind of stuff. It was just an ugly fight, and this happened 1992, so this was like right there while we were doing these shows.
Yeah, it's amazing how far we've come and how much has changed over the years. It's particularly for me. I went to my first gay bar in the late 70s, and when I did that, it gave me a feeling of a sense of belonging and a sense of community. But it also helped organize a lot of the groups that have made it possible for us to have the rights and privileges that we have now and didn't have then, because most of these organizations were funded by some sort of fundraiser or drag show or something that was done at these clubs. And they were organized at the clubs because that's where you went to find people to become part of your group. So really the clubs played a big part in the fact that we can now go out and pretty much go almost anywhere without, unless you're really, blatantly in your face trying to get in somebody's, in somebody's face, you can pretty much live your life. You can go to dinner with 6 guys going to a nice restaurant and nobody stares at the table and, throws things at you. It's a different environment than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
I couldn't be happier about that.
I'm sure.
Especially for young people coming up. One of the things that we're doing with the television shows that we produced at the City Nightclub is we're forming an archive. As a matter of fact, here it is right here, that we're hoping to figure out some way to make this available to anyone, anywhere, any time of day or night. And the reason is because there are kids in rural areas right now who are struggling with the same things that we were struggling with in the 80s and 90s. And they really are feeling alone in the sense that they don't know anybody who's gay because everybody who's gay is also scared. So, I mean, the idea of there being a place like the City Nightclub is something that I want to make sure that every gay kid in the world knows about. And so that they can have an understanding that they have a history and that there is a community that they're part of.
Absolutely. And I'm going, actually a week from today, I'm going to be heading down to Fort Lauderdale and meeting with the folks at the Stonewall National Museum and Archives. In Fort Lauderdale, they have a huge archival project that was started, I think in the 70s, as the Stonewall Library by a member of the GayBarchives group on Facebook, Mark Neil Silber. And it has evolved into this large project with massive archives of gay materials and information from all over the country, based right in Fort Lauderdale. And so I'm going to go down there and spend a couple of days talking with them and searching through their archives and getting some information. And I'll probably end up doing a segment for this series of shows focused just on that archive. And there's also one in California. There's the USC One Archives, which has a large selection. But I think the one at Fort Lauderdale, the Stonewall, has more digital access, which is what I try to do with everything that I do, is to make sure that it's not just in a building and you have to come to my building to look at the stuff.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't help those people in the rural areas. They need to be able to find it online. And,
that's what we're doing with the City Nightclub video. There was quite a bit of video altogether. Well, there were half-hour episodes. Altogether, we have about 300 of them that survived. We did 429 night scenes alone, and there was more than 100 outrageous. But they sat in the 3/4-inch big broadcast videotape thing, which you can't copy anymore.
Right.
Anyway, that's what they were on, and they were stored in a basement storage unit for 20 years, something like that. So I mean, they didn't all survive, but we now have all of them that did survive, and there's about a little over 300 of them.
So are you going to house them on your own servers, or are you looking for somebody else to do that?
We're working on that right now. I'm working through Gay and Lesbian Archives of the Pacific Northwest. And once you tell them about the project going on in Florida, we will probably try to hook up with them, particularly if it's a digital project where people from anywhere in the world can go and look at the stuff. I would love to have our programming involved with that. Absolutely.
Well, I will talk to Hunter when I'm down there. He runs the Stonewall Museum, and I will talk to him and find out, and I will get your information to him so you can connect with each other and discuss the possibilities. And the way I look at it, I tell people, even with the video segments, right now I think I've got like 48 of them online. The way I set them up, you can go to any of those segments and you can download it, or you can get an embed code and put it in your own website. So I'm not trying to say, hey, hands off, this is my property. The idea is to get the message out. And so I really appreciate people who do archival projects that are more of that mindset, because that's how you're going to find it. That's how the word's going to spread. And I will gladly put that information wherever they are on the archives page of my website as well. So people can look there and they can say, oh, here's this archive here and this one. And they can just click on a link and go to it. So
this is why I'm trying to set you up with one of our key figures in Gay and Lesbian Archives of the Pacific Northwest, because he's going to have more detailed information about the history of bars in general in Portland. And my experience is going to be limited to about 1978 or 1987 to the present. He knows all the stuff from before then. And I really do want to get you guys hooked up so you can have a conversation with him, because there's more to the Portland bar scene than what I'm telling you.
Well, that'll be awesome, because, you know, the whole project, and I don't know how many of the segments you've watched, but the whole project is about taking individuals telling their stories. I don't care if they're celebrities or if they're entertainers or if they're patrons. I don't care who they are, but everybody has memories to tell about, you know, the gay bars from their past. And I encourage people to share those stories. And a lot of times people like the idea of not having, you know, some pedagogue sitting on a pedestal somewhere and just spewing out facts. They want to hear the story from your heart. They want to hear, you know, how you responded to it and how you interacted with it and what it meant to you. And so,
interesting you should say this, Art, because this is the very reason why I got involved in public access television to begin with. Whenever you hear a story on the news about gay or lesbian people, or maybe say Native Americans or people of color, when you see those stories, they are filtered through an editorial process, okay? What public access TV does is allows people to speak for themselves, their own story, okay? And that's one of the reasons that really drew me to public access television, how I ended up at the City Nightclub to begin with, because I am a firm believer in allowing people to speak for themselves. And that goes along the lines of what you were just saying.
Absolutely. And that's why, you know, I've gotten so much positive feedback from people that have participated in this project, as well as people who have just watched the segments or responded to the Facebook posts or whatever. It's unfiltered. I don't edit the segments really, other than to add some graphics that may, you know, or a photograph of a bar we're talking about, or something that helps them understand what the story is about. But I generally don't go through and say, you know, bleep out people's words and, you know, change things. If that's what they want to say, then who am I to say, no, you don't have a right to say that?
And that is how it should be, Art. That's how it should be.
And that's why I'm so glad to have people like you that are willing to take a little time out of their day and, you know, talk a little bit about some of the history that they have. Because even if you don't tell somebody that, you know, Hisco Disco was on this street from this date to that date, and it was so many square feet. And
I don't have that information. Yeah,
you know, people can find that, but they have to first know that there was a Hisco Disco, and that it did have, you know, some impact on people's lives, and that, you know, they can look it up. They can start finding out more information about it. It can, you know, kind of snowball. But so I don't usually push anybody to go overboard on the details. It's just a matter of capturing the vibe and knowing that it was part of a scene that played some sort of an impact in people's lives back then. So what have you been doing since then?
Since then, I've been involved with transition projects in Portland, and it's a variety of different programs. And the overarching goal of what we're doing is our tagline, which is homelessness to housing. And what I've been doing for the last 15 years is I've been what's called a residential advocate at one of the shelter programs there. And basically what we do is we have a facility with 90 men, and each person there has a case manager and a residential advocate. I was a residential advocate. And our job is basically to help these people get to the point where they understand what the barrier is between where they are now and being in housing. And our job is to help them understand what those barriers are, work on eliminating those barriers, and getting them into stable housing that they can keep. And it is the hardest job I've ever loved. Couldn't ask for anything better.
You get to use any of your video skills in this project, or?
Not a bit. Nah, I don't care.
So you hung up the camera.
No, we don't allow cameras in the shelters because the same kind of thing. There's probably lots of people there who don't want their friends to know they're homeless.
Right.
So we no cameras. There are security cameras on certain locations that we have to have.
So you pretty much hung up the video camera. The videography is in
Yeah,
your
I can
history?
still do it, but video, I just don't see that being a big part of my future because I'm not really needed for what I was doing because now everybody can do that in their house. You know what I mean? What I was doing was allowing people, supporting people and telling their own stories, and now people can tell their own stories with what they have in their living room.
Right.
I couldn't be happier that I'm not needed because I'm basically a lazy guy.
But yeah, with the advent of, all these cell phones with cameras in them and stuff, there's nowhere you can go that isn't vulnerable to the concept of having somebody captured on video. You never know,
Yeah.
no matter where you are. And fortunately for us, that means that whatever part of gay history happens from here on forward is likely to be captured on video.
It's going to be captured somewhere, yeah.
But in the past, it was a big ordeal. I mean, people, I'm sure even when you did this project with City Nightclub, this was not a matter of pulling your iPhone out of your pocket and snapping some video. It required, tripods and cameras and lighting and all this stuff. And
everybody who was there knew this. I mean, we made sure that people understood if you're coming into this club tonight, you're going to be on TV.
Right. But I'm saying it was a big production. Today, it's not a big production. You pull an iPhone out of your pocket, push a button, and suddenly you're shooting video.
Yeah.
Back then, it was a big deal.
The world is not getting worse. It's just getting filmed.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about these bars in Phoenix and Portland, and for capturing something from 25 years ago that probably nobody would ever be able to see firsthand had you not done that, and had Lanny not been, allow that kind of thing to happen back then and see the importance of it. So I'm really glad you did that. And I'm going to encourage everybody that's watching this segment or listening to it on the podcast, I'm going to recommend that everybody go to my podcast listings and click on the link to the video and actually watch your video on the Gregory Franklyn YouTube channel, which I will put a link in the credits as well, so everybody can see it for themselves and see the whole thing. And I really appreciate what you've done and you taking the time today to talk about these bars.
Thanks for doing this, Art. I really appreciate it as well, because the more networking that gay and lesbian people and organizations around the country do, it's a good thing for us to be together on an even larger scale. I really appreciate it. Good work, buddy.
Thank you.
And that concludes another segment of the GayBarchives podcast. You can find more podcasts at gaybarchives.com/podcast. We also have more information about this podcast and links to the other podcasts we have completed. We hope you enjoy your trip down memory lane.